Hello again, I'm Mark. Welcome back to Three Bridges. So this is my yearly update. So my plan is once a year I'll take you around the whole of the loft. You can see progress I made over the last year from the previous year, what's new, what have I been working on, what do I think worked well, what do I still need to do, and then a little bit at the end about what I've got planned for the next year, so which will be year 3. So this seems a good point to start. So this is my extra station on the 3 levels, and a year ago this didn't exist, along with all the track that went down to it. This time last year I basically got the part you can see behind at the very top here, so this sort of area here, this is part of my Chiltern line. So my Chiltern line runs down one side of the loft, turns around at the end, and then starts heading back into what I call my London side of the station. So this is my countryside. And a year ago I had basically turned the main sort of one side of the loft into a dog bane, so I could run trains continuously, but they effectively run through 3 of the stations that I had created as part of the Chiltern line. So this year's a lot of work went on to get the other side of the loft finished. So if I change to this view, so this is looking down the loft, so you can see the extra station down here, and it basically follows down, and then I've got a level further out, which is into the sort of eaves of the loft where I've got my Chiltern line running. So for those who aren't familiar with the channel, or maybe have only recently subscribed with that, I'm building a layout on multiple levels, and it's basically inspired by various railway journeys from my life. So I'm going to take you around the loft. I'll explain the various stations and what they mean to me and where they fitted in my parts of my life. And this is the lowest deck, so there's going to be 3 decks on this layout, and they represent different stages of where I've lived in the country. So this whole lower level really goes from the age of 5 up to sort of my mid-20s, when we sort of I left London and moved up to the Midlands, but that's for another year and a different deck. So let's take a tour around, and I'll introduce some of the other stations and what they mean to me. Okay, so we'll start at the end of the loft. This is actually the latest bit of the layout that I sort of put together over the summer. So this is Aylesbury. We'd gone away to Singapore for a couple of years, Dad being the RAF, and we came back, and my dad was still out in Singapore, so me and my mum travelled down to London from Lincolnshire and then up to Aylesbury. And I remember getting out the station here and seeing this building in the back, this one here. I'm wondering what it was. It looks very modern to a lot of the architecture, colonial Singapore, not like the Singapore today. It's a car park. So this is going to be the big structure at the back of the station. I'm going to be building over, scratch building over next year, and very sort of concrete. And Aylesbury was in decline over the whole of the 70s basically. So the layout is very much still as it was. You've still got the main 2 lines running through, which are the ones going up to sort of Rugby, Leicester, Sheffield, Great Central. But in the 60s of the beaching cuttings, Aylesbury sort of became the end of the line. So just these DMUs, which were new, I suppose, in the 60s. These things ran up and down to Marylebone. So that's what I want to sort of create, a station that's declining, but very much in the 70s. Still some remnants of the old station engine shed, and a lot of the kits that I will have here will be part of my childhood. Anyway, that's quite a big scene to work on for next year. So this is Wendover. So this is my second, I suppose, station as you go around the layout. And this is the first one I built. So starting right at the beginning really, because it's sort of the start of my railway journeys. I remember being here at the age of 5, my first railway journey up to Marylebone, and lived around Wendover and Halton for a lot of the early part of my life. So the station's fairly simple. Over the last year I sort of created more space at the back so I can do a bit more scenery at the back, and I've got a final plan now for the front. But yeah, that's where it sort of all started, and a little bit of scratch building. So the next part's Amersham, and this is part of the layout that sort of got lost behind a lot of the stuff that's occurred in front since I originally built it. I'll try and give you a better impression of that. So because I put the reservoir line in front, I sort of have to look in. I probably see a better view than the sort of the camera shows. So I've got the sort of the pub behind, and then Amersham station with the sort of 3 lines running through it down to the red bridge at the end. So this one is my first solo railway journey. I suppose I travelled up to Manchester for a university interview. Do you remember it? But it would be the station that I would eventually went to Uxbridge, and this is the station where I would often change over from the underground to the Chiltern line for the last bit back to Aylesbury and Stoke Mandeville. And this spot here is where I would stand waiting for the Chiltern line to turn up, having sort of got back to Amersham on the underground. So I suppose on a plus side, most of this scene is finished. There's just a few bits. I've still got the red bridge to know where to sort of join up, and the car park scene at the back, but a lot of it's there. It's the early scenics that I don't really like, that I'll probably change. And obviously as you pull out of Amersham, so as I leave Amersham, I've got this big scene here of scenery that I just haven't started at all. I'll sort of look to that next year. But it leads up to the next station. So this scene's Moor Park, or Poor Mark as it's known in my family. So it's a station I travel through a lot, but I don't ever actually get off the platform here. But I've always sort of liked this sort of simple structure of the underground station, with the access from the station building in front. This is my interpretation of a sort of Chiswick round building. I didn't like the original one. Still a lot more scenery to do here, but it sort of gets us to the far end of the loft. So as you leave Poor Mark, you turn the corner and you come to this end scene that I've been working on for the last couple of months. So this is where the Uxbridge Underground line comes up as you're heading into Harrow on the Hill. And obviously I've got at this point all the lines of my layout, so I'll have my East Coast West Coast lines at the back that'll be heading up to the next deck, and I've got my Chiltern lines and my little goods line that's come from Aylesbury that heads into the goods yard. and the 2 underground lines that head down to Uxbridge. So come back to Uxbridge. So this part of the layout covers about 7 years of my life, really, from when I was about 18 to 25. And they're my university years. So I lived around Uxbridge and Hillingdon, Ruislip Manor over that period in different locations. But all my train journeys home would always start here at Uxbridge Station. I'd travel up to Harrow on the Hill, so I'll show you that in a bit. And then from there I would get either the Underground or the Chiltern line back to Stoke Mandeville or Aylesbury. So you can sort of see how that part of the layout joins up. Anyway, for this year the major achievement was I've got my Underground line running. So the Uxbridge Station part is on a continuous loop, so I can have trains running in on the lower deck, turn around, and then they run completely around the loft. So just turn it around slightly, so they come down this side, following underneath what is my Marylebone station, and then they loop round underneath my second London station and back up to our Harrow on the Hill at the other end. So it's been really nice just having underground trains running whilst you're up here doing stuff. They just sort of make their way around with no problems at all. So that part of the track work is all finished. The other thing is I've also managed to get all the track work done for the Chiltern line finished as well. So that runs up from Aylesbury up to Marylebone, and that's an end-to-end operation. So you basically set a train off, and then a couple of minutes later it'll arrive at the destination station. So I've got quite a bit of different playability up here. So with the Underground, there's still loads more to do in terms of the scenic side of it, but I'll just try and give you a few sort of key bits so you can understand how the layout works. So this view is just trying to show you that there's the 3 decks. So there's 4 lines at the bottom, so I can park 2 trains up, the 2 central lines that run through. Next deck up, there's 2 separate outer platforms, and then the top again has 2 separate outer platforms. So at Uxbridge in real life, there's 3 tracks running into 4 platforms on this top level structure, and this is what I have recreated in cardboard form last year to sort of finish it off. Still got other stuff to do inside and put people in, but I've got a basic structure that I'm quite happy with. And this part of the layout is quite different to all the others. It's a very standalone part. What do I mean by that? So if you go back to sort of Wendover, which is just over here, you've obviously got scenery behind and in front of the station. And the station's sort of rooted or seated into the environment around it. Whereas the way I've built Uxbridge, it's like a standalone piece that you could take out of the loft. I suppose you could take it to an exhibition. Don't think anyone would ever want to see it, but I hadn't really thought about that when I was building it. But it is something that is slightly different in the way it looks and operates. There's no sort of environment around it. And then this is just trying to show you on the first level how the 2 tracks sort of exit the station, and then they make their way down to what I call the Cheese Grater Bridge. So this was just a complete folly that I created. I just like the idea of 6 tracks running through a bridge. And then this is the view from the bridge. So you've got the 6 tracks, which is what I call Hillington Hill. It doesn't exist at all, it is just my imagination. And this is basically my fiddle yard for my underground trains, which is the whole point of building the station in the first place. So they make their way up. So this part's still got some scenics to do. I'll think about that next year. It's mainly the ballasting and a little bit of sort of grass vegetation. So at the end of Hillingdon Hill, you have to go through a series of points that brings you down to the 2 tracks. And I always knew there'd be sections of the layout that I didn't need to scenic. They're just the background bit that the trains use to get from A to B. And finally the 2 tracks head up into the section at the end. So this is where they rejoin the scenic part of the layout in the Uxbridge cutting I've been working on for the last couple of months. And then as you pass around there, you come into this station here. So it's quite a large one. So this is Harrow on the Hill. It's sort of representative of it. It's sort of inspired by the key sort of structures you get around Harrow on the Hill. I've tried to stick faithfully to the layout and the design and the key parts of the building. So 6 tracks passing through, so you've got 4 underground lines and 2 Chiltern lines as well, as you do at Harrow on the Hill. So this, again, I built a lot of this, scratch built it before I'd actually moved to this house, so I had the structures, but I haven't sort of come back to it since and sort of finished it off. So that's another thing for next year I'd like to get done. And then you sort of move down to, there's a bridge at the end of the station, a road bridge, which again I want to start working on again quite soon. So as trains pass through the station, you get a glimpse of them with the canopies. It's quite a nice scene to have, and I spent a lot of my life here. So as I was saying, it is going from sort of 18 to 25, the 7 years I was at Uxbridge, and I would spend an awful lot of my time just here. Okay, so I would be waiting for the Chiltern line back to Aylesbury, or I'd have come in on the other platform, and then you basically either ran up over the top and down onto platform 4, or there was an underpass as well. You could go under the platforms and get up to platform 4, and I'd jump on the next train to Uxbridge. So yeah, a lot of memories of passing through this station very quickly, really, not hanging around for very long. So as you leave Harrow on the Hill, the underground lines drop down, and they basically form into a 2-track return loop. So I can have like an eastbound and a westbound train going at the same time, and then they return to Harrow on the Hill on the opposite track. So I have the capability of running a continuous train from Uxbridge, or having a single train run up from Amersham, around London, and then back to Amersham. And I can change the platforms that they go into at Harrow on the Hill. It takes a lot of jumping around, changing points, and until they're electrified, those points, it's a bit hair-raisy when you do it, so I tend to just leave the points set. In terms of there's going to be a couple of stations under the London boards, but that's for next year. I haven't started on building those sort of underground stations. So still lots of scenic to do around here. But the other main part of the station, or the layout I got done this year, was as you come out of Harrow on the Hill, it's these 2 lines at the front. So these are my Chiltern lines, and then they're heading into the Marylebone station that is sort of the stub end for the Chiltern line. So I'll introduce that next. So this is part of the Marylebone that I'm going to model. So obviously, if you remember back to the beginning of this episode, that first railway journey set off from Wendover and headed up to London, and it would have stopped at Marylebone station. So it's quite a long part of the layout. It's about 2.5 meters long, this particular section, and I've got to put Marylebone in, going all the way down there, just beyond where the sort of template for the canopy over the final platforms will be. And there's various things I wanted to include at Marylebone. I definitely wanted to have the turntable. There was one which allowed them to have from the age of steam, and it would allow me to turn around steam trains and run a couple of steam trains up to Aylesbury and back on sort of steam train away days. And in fact, steam trains did a visit Marylebone on famous occasions, but the majority of the traffic is just the DMUs coming in and out. It's sort of sandwiched in between lots of blocks of flats and things. So, and again, it's part of this 70s, 80s when Marylebone was in decline, before it got sort of revamped not so long ago. So this is going to be the old key elements from the old station. So if I move down a little bit more, you can see the Rossmore Road bridge that was sort of building over the summer, and then behind the platforms and the start of the canopies over the main station building. So there's still lots to do here. Looking forward to working on it next year. Okay, so just in terms of finalising what else got done this year. So there's obviously the Marylebone board. You can see the underground lines coming through and under this board here, and this is my second London station. This is going to be part of my East Coast and West Coast line for much later years, but obviously because I was building London, I needed to start thinking about, well, how much I could have here and the rough track layout. So there's nothing permanently fixed. It's basically a fiddle yard for my East Coast and West Coast stock. I'm going to have one station inspired by stations on the north side of London. I think as it gets built, it'll become pretty obvious where the inspirations come from. But for the moment, it's just somewhere to have the trains waiting. They've got nowhere to go really. They can go up an incline just above Wendover and then they stop there. And that's all for the future. So when I was originally sort of planning this over the 8 years, I had got year 1 and 2 to get this lower deck done, and then year 3 was going to be the start of the next deck up. So for those of you who don't familiar with this sort of deck idea and the multi-deck I've got, there's potentially 3 decks for my main line. So obviously I've got the lower deck, which is the Chiltern line, this second deck, which is going to be my West Coast line, and then this top deck, which is sort of up at eye height for me, is my East Coast line. And this whole thing was going to take me about 8 years. But what I've suddenly realised over this year is there's no rush. I'm enjoying doing the scenics, and the London side of the board has got a lot of buildings to go in. So I've decided I'm going to postpone the second deck for a year and just still keep working on this lower deck, finishing off the scenics, getting a lot of the London build done. I still will have the wood and the time to start putting in these open frameworks for the second deck. It's a very simple structure. Now I've got all these B-frames in, it's just a case of building them in the garage and sliding them in place. But what I've realised over the year is if I make a mistake or I need to drill an extra hole in here, it just showers everything below with sawdust. So I need to plan out the second deck a lot more clearly and have a defined track plan, I think, before I start. Whereas with the lower deck, I just sort of made it up as I went along. I had a rough idea for the track plan, but I just sort of fitted things in. And also I've got to think about getting lighting underneath this second deck so that I can see the lower deck as well. So there's still plenty to do, but what I'm going to focus on more over the next year is just finishing off some of the scenes for the lower deck. I'm going to do the episodes in the similar style I've been doing recently, where I'll just focus on one scene for most of the episode, and then if there's anything else I've been doing around the loft, I'll give you a quick update on that. So that's where I'm at. Year 2, really pleased. I've got the Chiltern line, all the track is in. I've got my underground line, all the track is in, everything's running smoothly. I don't need to buy any more rolling stock at the moment. I see the odd train and I'll get it. Okay, so we're back just in front of Hare on the Hill, and if you've been following the channel, you'll know that I have a little goods yard. It's basically a little shunting puzzle that I created. This wasn't in the original plan for the layout, but I just realised that my goods trains needed somewhere to go. So I suddenly started enjoying shunting puzzles, Dibb's Yard, and a couple of other American layouts where they have a simple shunting yard, goods yard, and I decided to create one myself. So this doesn't represent anything that I have experienced in my life. It's just I decided to have a couple of docks. So I've got a milk dock because the milk train used to run up to Marylebone, and the first train out in the morning was always known as the milk train when I was a child. And then I've got two sort of yards either side for some simple freight, and then a run around in the middle so a train can come in, the engine can go off, and then I can break down the train. So it's a very different way to operate trains. It's very new for me. I've never done a shunting yard before, but I'm really enjoying sort of playing with it and the fun of just doing something quite different that you have to sort of think quite a bit. There's quite a lot to control, and obviously with the manual point levers as well. These ones are much simpler than some of the others I've created around the layout. And doing the scenics for this area. So I now just need to blend this in to the station behind. So that's my next challenge as well for next year. So that's it. So that's how far the layout came this year. As I say, tracks all in for the lower deck. I think I counted up 56 points or turnouts when I'd finished, which was, I hadn't realised I got that far. Still loads of buildings to do, so a lot of scratch building for next year and finishing stuff off, but really looking forward to it. And yeah, it's sort of been the first 2 years I feel I've broken the back of getting a layout in the loft. So as always, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch up with you in December, where I'm going to be talking about bridges, but more about that in December. So maybe catch you next time. Cheers.